Megan,
Hi, hello. So good to see you.
you too. Oh, sorry, that just pushed a button. There we go.
Yeah,
Um, all right. I'm excited about this conversation.
me too.
I do have a hard stop at 2:30 because of picking up kids. So
Totally.
just putting that
Get
out
it.
there.
Yeah, great.
All
Okay.
right. Well, we'll have a little pause. Any questions or anything before we start?
No, no, happy
Okay.
to dive in.
Awesome. Well, I'll do a little pause and then I'll introduce the podcast and we'll dive right in.
Perfect. Okay.
All right. Welcome back to the Abundant Practice Podcast. I'm your host, Allison Pereira. I'm here with Megan Walsh, and we're going to be talking about bringing creativity into the way you're running your business. I'm so excited. Megan, you're a creative arts therapist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
no better person to be talking about this.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk today.
Yeah. So, yeah, talk us through what you even mean by creativity. Let's start there.
Yeah. Oh, great question. Great place to start. So I think we all kind of, many of us think of creativity as like art, music, drama, these like traditional arts that we all grew up with, right? Taking music lessons, taking art lessons, and that creativity is something that you're quote unquote good at. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about creativity from more of like a mindful perspective. And if we think about the word create, it literally means to bring something into existence.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think of it that way, creativity is all about like, what do we want to make from nothing, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do we want to bring into our realities? And also how do we use creativity as a container, like a container for support, connection, exploration, growth. So creativity is many things, but a lot of richness in creativity.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm the daughter of a sculptor and painter. It's my mom.
Huh?
My dad's an incredible musician.
Oh,
And so people are always like, oh, like do you create art? And I'm like, I create businesses.
you sure do.
I really love it. I mean, I do
Uh-huh.
some other kind of more traditional creative things, but the thing that
Yeah,
comes easiest to me and just feels most natural is creating businesses. So I love your
totally.
reframe that it's not
Yeah.
necessarily just the thing you see on stage or in a
Yeah.
gallery.
Absolutely. It's so important to remember that because then it like reframes creativity as something we all have. Like every
Mhm.
human on this planet is a creative being. Even
Yeah.
from what do I want for dinner tonight? Like I want tacos. And so then I go upstairs and I create, right? Tacos from dinner. I thought about it and then I made it. Like that's something
Uh-huh.
really simple. But that applies, right? It applies to our work. It applies to the businesses we're building, and it applies to our relationships with our clients, right? We're creating an entity with
Hmm.
our clients, and so it's so important to remember that is where we are in the process, and we have a lot of power
Yeah.
in knowing that we can own that.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about probably the majority of therapists listening right now are listening
Hmm.
because they feel creatively disconnected.
Hmm.
I think just as human adults, we are often
Totally.
creatively disconnected.
Yeah.
So, can we talk some about maybe how that process comes to be, how we get disconnected, and then how to get reconnected or newly connected?
Totally. Yes, 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 yes. I think we all get so disconnected because we are so in our brains, right? We are thinking, we are overthinking. I'm sure there's many
Hmm.
overthinkers out there, and we are looking, we are reading, we're getting information. I think especially in practice building, I know what happened for me, and I'm sure happens for many other therapists, is you're comparing. You're like, okay, this person's doing
Mm.
this way, they're doing it that way. I know I feel like I should do it the same way. And so then when like the shoulds get in there, right? I should be doing this,
Yeah.
I should be doing that. So we are then going on a path where we're not necessarily connected to, but what is me? Like how do I want to do this? What do I bring uniquely to this?
Hmm.
And so when we have that disconnect where we're not necessarily aligned with where we are in the process and who we are in the process, that
Hmm.
is where we get stuck because then we get in this place of like, I'm not measuring up, right? I'm not good enough. I don't have as many followers. I don't have as many inquiries. I don't have as many intakes clients, right? We get into this spiral of like, it's not
Hmm.
enough. It's not enough. And again, personally have been there. And we come in and out of that so many times.
Yeah.
And so when we recognize that we're there, when we're starting to feel like ugh, burnt out, like this is so hard. I remember early on in like building an Instagram and all of that, like I would do it really like intensely for a little bit and then I would like ghost for like
Uh-huh.
months because I'm like, this is too much, too much. So it's I would say that in that moment when you notice you're stuck, when it comes to creativity, I love thinking about like who is your creative self and what does
Mm-hmm.
that look like? And so there I like to
Mm.
start with like what did you love to do as a kid? Right? Let's go
Yeah.
back to that inner child. What did you love to do? And give yourself some true time and space to do that. Now
Mm-hmm.
for me, I'm trained as a music psychotherapist.
Mm-hmm.
However, my inner child loved to dance. And so for me, sometimes if I'm feeling really stuck, I know like, okay, it's time to get up. Like, let's turn on some Spice Girls and like just dance around and like just connect in that way. Because in order to reconnect, we have to get back into our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And I know everyone's hearing, right? Somatic, using somatic hearing, breath and body, connecting, but it's so true. We've got to get back into our bodies and allowing ourselves to create, whether it is just free drawing, free writing, something that like gets all of our stuff kind of connected. We connect to it and then get it out into the world in
Mm-hmm.
some way without judgment, right? Like just be curious, see what's there.
Yeah.
And then I think you're going to get a lot of information about what you want and where you want to go with your
Mm-hmm.
practice.
I had my own like experience with this, like after the peak of COVID.
Mm.
Um, I was so depressed because I'm so extroverted and
Yeah,
it's just, and I was overworking. Nobody was asking me to overwork, but I thought it was my
yep,
duty for some reason. And
totally.
so it was all just too much.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I was like, I don't know what's fun anymore. Like, I don't even have fun. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what to
right.
do. And I did that idea of like, go back to what you loved when you were younger.
Mhm.
And for me, that meant so I went to a performing arts high school. So I sang and I acted there. And so I was
Yeah,
like, improv doesn't require any sort of planning. I have no space
yeah.
in my life to plan anything right now. I don't want to rehearse or learn lines.
Mm,
So I went for improv and this idea that it is all in your body. Like if ever there was a art form that you think could be all mind, all just brain, it could be improv
mhm.
because you are having to like go real fast in there. But nobody
Right.
wants to watch two people standing there having a conversation.
Yeah.
You have to be in your body, you have to be
Mhm.
moving, you have to be
Mhm. Yeah.
scene building essentially.
Right.
Um, and it really brought me back to life, honestly. And it
Yeah.
like
Oh,
sparked more, like I was driving around more because that's where I did most of my singing was like in the car. So I was driving
yes.
around more and I
Yep.
like nixed all audiobooks and podcasts and was only
Mhm.
listening to music. And so it's
Mhm.
bringing that back to myself, bringing me
Yeah.
back to myself through that
Yeah.
creativity was
Uh-huh.
so instrumental in pulling me out of depression and like feeling more like myself than I had even in years, like pre-COVID.
Yes.
I didn't realize how
Yes.
far I'd strayed.
Right. Oh, it's so true. And when you're in that movement, like you get into a flow and you get into this place where actually you're going to be way more quote unquote productive and creative, right? You're going
Hmm.
to all these new ideas are going to come to you even though
Yeah.
you think I should be listening to all the podcasts and making all the notes and doing all the
Right.
things because that's what's going to get me ahead, but actually no, it's really going to be this like okay, letting yourself just be in your body and however that looks for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And play. Like I think
Play.
it being
Yeah.
a low stakes thing, especially for folks who are
Mhm.
creating practices, like that's so
Yeah.
high stakes and it's so
Yeah.
much pressure that if you can
Totally.
do something where like, it's not a stage production that you care about a bunch,
Yeah.
or like you don't
Right.
have like a solo oboe situation with the symphony. Like it's just
Yeah.
you messing around.
Totally.
And if you screw up, no one really cares.
Yeah.
Like it's just your own
Right.
ego. And then you're like, oh, well.
Exactly.
Like that's about as much pressure as I would want to put on whatever your
Uh-huh.
creative pursuit is. Like you're not trying to get your piece of art into the Met. You're just
Yeah.
literally just
You're
like
just
creating it and maybe tossing it. Who
right.
knows?
Totally. You're just creating and you're noticing.
Hmm.
And like and that's where creativity like is a container. It's a place where you can like put all the stuff that you might not be so actually it might not be in your conscious awareness yet. right? Like
Mm-hmm.
subconsciously, you might be like, ooh, I hate this, right? I'm going down a path that doesn't feel aligned to me, and that's what's making me feel stuck. And then the
Mm-hmm.
second you, right, you bring it into creativity, you might be like, oh, actually, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then it almost like gives you permission to kind of like, let's say you do a lot of work and then you actually do want to make a pivot. You're allowed. You're
Mm-hmm.
totally allowed to, and it's okay. And that's actually a really good thing because you're learning more about yourself. And creative. If I'm thinking about creativity as a container and how it's supported me in my life, like if I grew up in a house, as many of us therapists have, where we didn't talk about emotions, and
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't a space to express it, and so I like all of my songs. I wrote a lot of songs that were just
Mm-hmm.
infused with like so much anger and angst, which if you knew me, you'd be like, what? Like, where did this come from? Even like
Mm-hmm.
reading it, I'd be like, I'm just making this up. Right? This is
Right.
not real. But then when I go back and look at it, I'm like, oh, honey, like you
Mm-hmm.
had a lot going on in there. And so, it's this
Yeah.
beautiful container where we can get, so much information that is
Mm-hmm.
being stored in our bodies that might not be, consciously there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think about like, okay, there's this container that can help us think outside the box, which can help our
Hmm.
businesses.
Yeah.
Because all that comparing we're doing and like shiny object chasing and all those kinds of things,
Mhm.
like I love a shiny object,
Oh yeah.
right? I love the promise of a shiny object.
Yep.
And then when I'm like, oh no, this is just a dull object, just like all the others on the shelf over here.
Yeah.
It's just marketing was good. Then it's
Right.
it's like, oh, oops, I just spent a lot of time, energy, money
Yeah.
on something that didn't pan out the way that I had hoped.
Hmm.
Um, I think about that like if I had spent that same time, energy, and not even money, but just that same time and energy not focusing on the business, like focusing
Hmm.
on my life
Right.
or focusing on creativity, that
Yeah.
that would have had me thinking about things differently. It would have
Totally.
like turned on different
Yeah.
parts of my brain that shift
Yeah.
perspective and shift problem solving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shifting, it can shift so much, and it can help you think of all these how different ways to approach things. And also, I think creativity is one of the most important aspects that actually helps me connect to my ideal client.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and just like kind of playing around with it. Because I think especially when we think about marketing, and I'm thinking from the lens of like, maybe you're starting an Instagram or TikTok or something like that, and you're really afraid of like, oh my God, like being seen. I think in those initial stages, you can get so stuck in like the you being projected outward, that it's really hard to like connect
Mm-hmm.
to the client and embody the client. But actually, like when you maybe like let yourself get creative of like, what would my client feel and experience, and let yourself kind of play with that, right? Play it out. And of course, right, your client is a version of you, so you're going to be accessing right your own stuff. And honestly, when you do it that way, then it's going to be more fun to create, right? To create content, because right, we are all creators now,
Mm-hmm.
and always. But it's going to be more, yeah, more helpful for you to embody that, and then to find more quote unquote success, or more reach, more expansion in your business when you're
Mm-hmm.
able to embody that, embody your client, and be able to speak to them in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about how it's deeper, right? It's deeper
Hmm.
than like you listing on your website the symptoms of
Yeah,
depression.
totally.
Instead, it's like that daily
Yeah,
lived experience that I talk about all the time. Like
for sure.
when you describe the daily lived experience, which requires creativity, it requires putting yourself in your client's shoes or going back to that
Hmm.
time in your life and
Yeah.
thinking it and feeling it and then
Hmm.
describing it,
Yeah.
then that's going to be so much more impactful. It's going to be so much
Yeah.
more alluring to an ideal
Right.
client than, are you
Yeah.
experiencing anhedonia? You know?
Totally. Literally, I did this just last night. I was creating like a post for today about like just using some memes around people pleasing. And like I was like I've started to like sit with like what are the exact experiences I've had, and like and how could I list that out? And literally the one was like if you're a people pleaser and you're still hungry, but there is one slice of pizza left.
Oh my
And
gosh. Yeah.
just that inner like, I can't take it. Like we have to split it, or this, or
Yeah.
you have to tell me 10 times that you're not going to eat it in order for me to eat it. Right. But like that, how much more of an impact that has than just saying, right, are you a people pleaser?
Right.
Listing that
Exactly.
on your site. And so
Yeah.
it's just it's a fun exercise to like, yeah, let's just play out. What are all these different scenarios that, I've experienced myself?
Yeah. And it sticks in people's heads more, right?
Yeah,
Like I
totally.
saw one actually this afternoon that was about people pleasing and it had like crumbs of dessert left. And like it was two people pleasers and one was taking like half of the crumbs and then the other would take half of that half and then half of that half out of that. And it was just
So
like it
true.
was just teeny tiny. And
Uh-huh.
like, I mean, that was hours ago and I
Yeah.
just thought of it because you sparked that. And
Yeah.
that's
Totally.
impactful because it's true.
Yeah, so true. We've all
It's a
been there.
parody of the truth, but it's still the truth.
Hmm. Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are some other ways that we can think creatively or bring creativity into our practices so that they're more fulfilling for us, so that they bring in the right clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think letting yourself have like what is your creative practice? So I
Mhm.
think it starts with getting in touch with your inner child. What does your inner child like to do? And building creativity into your daily practice, whatever that is. I think a lot of people go towards writing and journaling, but maybe it's your walk. Like you take a walk and then you just notice, because a walk is kind of a place where you get into flow, and you
Mhm.
can kind of, that's where big ideas come, or when you take a
Yep.
shower or something like that. But just having like an awareness of what's there, right? What's coming up. How do I want to infuse this into my practice building? Um, and then when it comes to your work, I think there's so much power of using creativity inside of the therapy room. Creativity in many forms is, there are levels of what we call aesthetic distance around creativity.
Mhm.
So something like, let's say your client is feeling a little bit stuck, and you're talking around a topic for a while, but like you want to like give it a new form, give it a different shape so you can kind of understand it a little
Mhm.
bit deeper. So I may say to a client, like, you know what, like, I know we've been talking about this feeling and we're not exactly sure where it comes from. Why don't you just take a minute and create an image of like, what does it look like if you were to make it look like something? And sometimes we'll do this with parts work too, like, what does this
Mhm.
part look like? And so when we do art is kind of gives us the most distance, right? It's kind
Mhm.
of like we have a little bit more control around what we're doing. It's not so embodied. So that's kind of a nice place to start when you have a client who's not so ready to get into their body yet. And then, we can bring music in, and music has levels of the distance. One way could be like, what song are you feeling connected to today? I love that question. It's kind of a nice get to
Mhm.
know you, because I've had, many clients who will come in like just like similar to me, like smile, I'm great. And then like
Mhm.
they share the saddest song I've ever heard. And
Uh-huh.
already, like, right, this is so much information about the client before we've ever even, dived in
Mhm.
to a history. So that music in that way can have more of a distance. When it comes to, to the body, just doing breaths, guiding your clients into, I have a ritual with many clients of starting the session with 3 breaths. And
Mhm.
that's kind of the check-in of like, what are you noticing coming up? So instead of just diving into this is what I did this week, like we start right with the body, like drop on in, see what's there.
Mhm.
And of course, these are all practices that you can obviously take yourself too when you're, doing this work. And then, deeper than that, sometimes the art, and for me, a lot of times it's music, can be like an incredibly reparative piece of the process. So if we're like kind of deep in some attachment, like early developmental stages, like bringing in the voice and perhaps even like singing to a client, which, and this comes from being a trained music therapist. I know not everybody can do this, but knowing that, being able to offer these pieces can be really reparative. And music kind of, or music and art, all of the arts bring like a third um element into the room that we can
Yeah.
like kind of we can put stuff on it. So
Mhm.
it's just a little bit easier to play with, given where our clients are in terms of their own kind of openness, vulnerability. It's kind of a nice way to dip your toe in. Let's put it over there. Let's put this anger part over there because it's not safe yet to hold in my body, but I can hold it, right? I can put it on this piece of paper. I can listen to it in this song. There's, right, so many ways to play and to play with material, with
Yeah.
creativity.
I love that. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but when I was pre-masters, I worked at a residential treatment center for
Uh-huh.
folks with eating disorders. And I somehow was allowed to run groups. I don't know exactly how or why, but whatever. I loved it. I did
Okay.
so much research before every group, but I
Yeah.
was like, I would really love everybody to bring in a song that describes how they feel. So kind of what you were saying. And it
Yes.
was so informative
Yeah.
and so like
Yeah.
heart-wrenching. And
Totally.
because we feel songs, you know, like
Yeah.
the good ones, we really
Oh,
do
yeah.
feel them.
Hmm.
And it was a way that it was something that actually helped build some empathy between some of the group members who
Mm,
didn't necessarily like
yeah.
each other very much.
Yeah.
Um, that they could
Yeah.
connect.
Totally. Oh,
Yeah.
it's such a huge, huge piece of connection. And yeah, so much information. And I would anybody that's listening, I would let you like think about what is a song you're feeling connected to today. And you know,
Mhm.
listen to it and notice like what is it telling about where you are? What do you notice in yourself? Could be pretty powerful.
Yeah. And I noticed like myself, as you asked that, granted, I'm in interview mode. I'm not like
Hmm.
fully sunk
Yeah.
in, but I'm like, I have no idea. And like, that's good information too. Like I'm
Yeah, yeah.
disconnected and it's just
Right.
information to like, after this call, maybe
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
sink it and figure it
See?
out.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a,
And what I love about that too, it like it's a quick, right? It's a quick thing that you can
Mhm.
do to sink in. It doesn't have to be a whole, you know, 45-minute yoga session. Like it
Right.
can be just like, oh, okay, let's sit with that
Hmm.
and see what's there, listen, check in. And that's where you can maybe start to write or find another way to process what's there. And you know, even just like those 3 breaths. I always
Hmm.
say, like, if my clients could take anything, like just let yourself do those 3 quick breaths, especially at moments during your day, right? Or maybe you're sitting at your work desk and you are like feeling really overwhelmed. Take the 3 breaths, see what's there, and then kind of move forward. Like any way where we can just like quickly drop into the body is huge.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. What else should we as therapists be considering for our
Mhm.
creativity? Not even for our clients, but just for ourselves. Are there other things
Yeah.
that we can add on top of what we've talked about?
Ah, that's a great question. And I guess it's very ooh, you know, one thing I love to talk about is resistance. Like,
Mm.
take a look at your resistance, especially to creativity. And I will say, as a music therapist, I am so resistant to making my own music, so resistant
Huh.
to it. Hmm.
Hmm.
And even in, you know, in my own as a client at, you know, in music psychotherapy, that's always been my thing. Like we'll say like, let's play around it. And I'll be like, I don't want to. Don't make me do
Hmm.
it. But so much of that is around like, am I feeling my own vulnerability and
Hmm.
my own sense of, am I feeling safe? Is whatever's happening? Because when you're entering music, right, you are getting vulnerable. And especially in that space, right, it's vulnerable, it's intimate in front of, you know, someone else. And
Hmm.
so really noticing if you're wanting to get creative, if you notice like, ooh, my inner child loves to paint or this, and you're resisting it, like
Hmm.
check in on that. Like what is
Yeah.
that for you? Because what are you trying to not dive into? What are you not allowing yourself to open up?
Hmm. Have you read the book, The War of Art?
I have not.
It's great. It talks a lot about resistance and creativity
Mm,
and how like it's
hmm.
always going to be there and let's just accept it and do it anyway, kind of.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
we can we can understand it and we can learn a lot from like what's creating the resistance, but
Yeah.
ultimately it's the doing of the thing
Yeah.
that's going to keep us moving forward.
Totally.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, it's an interesting
Yeah.
book. Because
Totally.
it kind of takes out some of the things people assume is just kind of like the woo-woo nature of art.
Hmm. Right.
And it is
Right.
more about like the discipline of sitting your butt down,
Yeah.
and doing it.
Which, right, like applies so intensely
Yeah.
to your practice. Like, right?
Uh-huh.
Like you are always like the queen of like just do it. Like just sit down and do it.
Yeah.
And that, right, that's so important. Where are you resisting in your practice? What are you avoiding? And
Hmm.
let yourself just, right, sit down and get into the act of creating whatever it is, right, that
Yeah.
you are needing to create and build.
Yeah. And I think for people like me who lean, I'm much better now, but I have leaned much more towards the perfectionistic in my
Hmm.
life than
Yeah,
the
same.
opposite. Um,
Hmm.
like really like full permission for it to be bad.
Yeah.
Like I was in an art therapy group as a client in my early 20s. And they
Mhm.
had, it was like all a bunch of perfectionists. And
Mhm.
they had
Yep.
us use
Totally.
our non-dominant hand for all the art.
Oh my God,
And it
yes.
was so helpful because I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to let myself off the hook otherwise.
Right. Right.
I had to have this
Totally.
excuse for why it was bad.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so like if anybody needs to use that, if
Uh-huh. Yeah. Oh,
that,
that's so great.
yeah.
Yeah, let yourself do that. And this just came to me too, like as a fellow perfectionist, in what you're creating in your practice, what you're building. I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but allowing yourself to to build something and then let it go.
Hmm.
I did a one-on-one with you,
Hmm.
maybe a couple years ago around, and when I was in the inner circle, I did a lot of work around building a coaching practice that was like specific for brides because I had just gone
Uh-huh.
through like a COVID
Look at that.
pandemic wedding and I was like, this was so stressful. Brides need support. I still think it's a great idea.
Hmm.
However, then I got pregnant and I had to let it go. I had no space for it. It like I felt so guilty of like I can't. I did all this work. I can't there, but it no longer was like creatively aligned with what
Hmm.
I felt passionate about, what I wanted to spend my time doing. And like that was such a hard lesson to learn that you can create, you can build, and continuing to tune into what's right for you. And
Yeah.
so that has like taken a whole new form now. It's, and I wouldn't be where I am without that version of
Hmm.
me having built that, because now I'm building on that. And
Yeah.
remembering that too, that whatever we create, it's not for no reason, and that you're going to continue to build upon it and build upon it, and it's all going to grow and shift and change. Your practice is going to grow and shift and change. You're going to grow and shift and change as a clinician. And so that's what I love about creativity, is giving us that permission
Yeah.
to and shift and change and be many versions, many forms of ourselves
Hmm.
and our businesses.
Yeah. It's so hard to let go when you've
Yeah.
invested time and energy and love, like you wouldn't have
Yeah.
invested all the time and energy if you hadn't loved the
Right. Of
idea. But
course.
that creative misalignment that ends up
Mm.
happening for many of us,
Yeah.
um, it's an important question if you keep holding on, like, what's it for? Like,
Yeah.
what's it filling for you right now? There was a time when it really filled something for you. What's it
Mhm.
filling for you now?
Right. Totally. Right. Which is so such an important question to sit with. And I think there's a lot of resistance there, right? The resistance to let go.
Yeah. Oof.
Because there's grief there, and that makes us kind of sit with some icky feelings that I
Hmm.
know hard to do. But that's again, right, where our let's listen to the song, let's take a breath, let's move comes in to help us feel and work through those emotions in order to let them move through us, and then be let go. Because if they don't, then they're going to get stuck. And then
Yeah,
we're going to get right into that process of being stuck in our heads and feeling overwhelmed and overworked. So it's all interconnected.
it is. It is.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you so much, Megan.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Where can people follow you or get in touch with you if they want
Yes.
more?
Yeah. So easiest place to find me is on Instagram at connect with Megan, Megan. And
Oh,
links to everything else is there too.
wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.